You're listening to the Asian MMA Podcast, where we talk about everything and anything going on in the world of Asian MMA. This episode is brought to you by that false sense of security that a cup gives you. I'm Dana Blouin, and this episode is your Asian MMA weekend recap. There was so much fight action in Southeast Asia over the weekend and some crazy 3-on-3 action to talk about. I mean, insane. Whenever you get more than two fighters in a cage at one time for one fight and they can team up on each other, and it's insane. We're going to get into it later in the episode. Before I get started, though, if I don't cover your event, but you had one this past weekend or you're going to have one sometime soon, reach out and let us know. I want to know that you're putting a show on, that you're doing events, and I want to cover them. I want to bring eyes to your event and the fighters putting it all on the line. So hit me up at asianmmapodcast@gmail.com so I know what's going on and I can maybe bring a little bit more exposure to your event, to the fighters, and just give them a bigger stage. Also, there won't be a video version of the podcast this week because I'm traveling, but that should be back next week. Hopefully all my travels will be done. We'll see. It's been a crazy week for me. So let's get it started. Let's just get into it because a lot to talk about today. The first one wasn't really on the weekend, but just before, and so that makes it count in my book. And that was One Warrior Series in Singapore on Thursday the 25th. I've said before that I'm a huge fan of OWS. I think what they're doing, it's great. They're doing a lot of really good things, and they're doing good things for fighters because they're giving them a platform to develop, to bring them, to a larger stage and get onto a one championship. Or maybe they don't go to one championship and they go to the UFC or they go to Road or they go to Risen. But one is there to really give them that platform. The same thing they're doing with the Hero Series in China I talked about last week. Really, fantastic stuff. Now, in the main event, we had Phuket, Thailand-based Brazilian Carlos Prates stop previously unbeaten EFC welterweight champ Gunther Kaluta in the second round with a body shot. Of all things, a body shot. Now, it was a wild 2 rounds, leading up to the stoppage, but when it came down to it, Prates was just too much for Kaluta. He just overwhelmed him. Thailand trained, just brought it. He's going to have that Muay Thai skill. He's going to punish the body, and that's what we saw. So, giving Kaluta his first blemish on his record. Now, the whole card was stacked with great fighters, from the regional scene and great fights. I know it's a development league for one championship, but damn, man, they're putting on good cards. I'll have the link in the show notes. I'll also put all the results. This is the only one I have all the results for. I'll put that in the show notes as well so you can see that. Fantastic card. If you guys aren't watching these on the one app or finding it somewhere else, you really are missing out because, this is a lot like that Dana White looking for a fight or what The Ultimate Fighter was, except it's just really good fights with guys who are hungry. And that's one of the things you see here in Asian MMA is that guys are hungry at this local level. Of course, anyone coming up in the ranks is hungry, but it's what you see is good stuff. Now, with that, with OWS out of the way, I want to jump to Saturday, April 27th. There was a lot going on around Asia on the 27th, which is a great problem to have. I didn't get to watch all the cards. I've watched some of the highlights, but it's a great problem to have when there's too much MMA going on and too much MMA that you can watch. One of the things I love about the local scene, and we see this everywhere, they're finding ways to get exposure, and it's becoming the norm to put up live streams. So no matter where you are in the world, you can tune into the fight live, or you can catch the videos on YouTube or Facebook afterwards. I love this. I wish we had this back in the 2000s. You could have watched regional stuff from the New England area or the Midwest or the West Coast coming through on Facebook. It didn't exist then. We have it now. So take advantage. Asia, Southeast Asia specifically, is a hotbed for undiscovered, up-and-coming talent. And you can see them coming up on these fights on Facebook or on YouTube, on the live streams. So take advantage. I'm going to link all of these in the show notes, like I said, so you'll be able to find the Facebook pages for the promotions. You'll see the streams. You can follow these if you want. You can catch these streams in the future. I highly recommend it. With that being said, I'll put all the episodes. I'm still working to update asianmmapodcast.com, but it will get there. You'll be able to find results and listings there. Maybe I'll start like a registry so people can actually go and find, upcoming events as well on there. That might be a good idea. Moving on. One of the countries where we've seen a lot of MMA talent kind of percolate to the top over the past few years is Malaysia. And really, that's no surprise, considering the depth of their amateur scene. Like, their Ministry of Sport and a lot of players like Rashid Salayah, Brent Yap, have really put effort into developing the MMA scene. And Jason Lowe, when he was CEO of Toon Talk, they funded MIMA, which was this fantastic nationwide MMA amateur tournament. They've had opportunities there that other countries haven't really been able to develop. And so we've seen a lot of fantastic fighters come out of there. So no surprise that they had at least 3 events this past Saturday, as well as I saw some people posting about BJJ tournaments in Malaysia. A lot going on in the scene. And so I'm really excited to talk about a few of them. And I want to start things off with my home away from home, Kuala Lumpur. I'll actually be flying there as soon as I finish recording this. And I'll probably post this episode from KL. Great city with great food and amazing fights. So, of course, first on the docket, I have MFC, or Malaysian Fighting Championship from KL. Massive event, 24 matches consisting of amateur boxing, Muay Thai, and MMA. Then their last 3 fights were all pro MMA. I didn't get to watch this whole card, but I've watched NFC in the past. They always deliver great action. I've got a link to the full stream in the show notes so you can watch it. Highly recommend it. MFC does great content. Next up, I've got to jump over to Johor Bahru, Malaysia, where they also put on an absolutely insane card with 37 fights, all amateur. That's Ultimate Beatdown. I love the vibe of UB fight cards. They keep their cage on the roof of a shopping mall in Johor Bahru. Now, it's covered, but they just basically leave the cage there all the time. And this is where the events are. You've got to go through the top floor of the mall, come out through the parking garage, onto the roof, and the cage is right there, and that's where the fights go down. Amazing, very gritty kind of feel to the event, and it's very Johor Bahru appropriate. Now, UB is very much a proving ground for a lot of great, not just Malaysian fighters, but fighters from Singapore, from all over, for years. I want to say they're probably the longest running MMA organization in Malaysia. They've had a lot of MIMA champions and top contenders come through UB and cut their teeth there. And these are people who have gone on to fight in much larger organizations, win championships, and just be overall successful. It's a fantastic organization. Again, I'll have a link to their stream. It's actually on their YouTube channel. Check out UB, support UB. They're doing great things for the grassroots organization of Asian MMA. Great organization. And you're going to get to see future champions fighting in that organization, which is one of the main reasons you should be watching it and following it. Next up, I'm going to jump over to the island of Borneo. My favorite vacation spot in all of Asia, Kota Kinabalu. It also happens to be home of Asian MMA legend AJ Pyro, who, if you don't know who AJ is, because his career is in the twilight these days, but he's still fighting. He still runs a gym, Borneo Tribal Squad, that puts out a lot of top fighters in Asia. So you got to check him out, look up his background. And check out Borneo Tribal Squad. Great gym. A lot of cool fighters coming out of there. KK in general has got a great fight culture. But, it's really like this kind of small, sleepy beach town of Kota Kinabalu. But they had an event that took place there over the weekend called Rampage FC, which was it was just 8 amateur MMA fights. And I say just 8 because the previous 2 cards had 24 and 37. But you got to keep in mind how small KK is compared to both Johor Bahru and KL. Now, they also had a juniors category, which I find really interesting. They had modified rules for safety reasons. So with the juniors, I think that there was no ground and pound. I don't know if they did head strikes or not, but I saw on their Facebook page that there was no ground and pound. Now, one of the things I love about this is because when you're talking about a place like Borneo, it's East Malaysia. And so it is part of Malaysia, but it's completely separate from the peninsula. It's like a 3-hour flight from the mainland just to get to Borneo. They need smaller events like this to be held in gyms, just like this one was, for the fighters to be able to get experience. So that way when they go to a bigger organization or they go to fight somewhere else, they've actually got the experience under their belt. They're not going into a big organization for their first fight. And that's what I love about this. KK, as a city, has a fantastic culture around, MMA and fighters coming up out of there. Like I said, AJ Pyro came out of KK. That's where he runs his gym. Also, one of the baddest men in Asia, Darren Lowe, former undefeated MIMA heavyweight champion, I think for 3 or 4 seasons. These are people who are coming out of KK who are just fantastic fighters, and it's got that kind of culture, sort of like how Westerners would think of Hawaii, in the way that Hawaiian fighters have a certain grit to them, and the scene there is very unique. KK relates to that very well. So if you're a fan of Western MMA, of the UFC, think of all these Hawaiian fighters, guys like BJ Penn or Cabbage, Travis Brown, who came out of Hawaii. And, that's the type of fight culture. That's the type of mentality that those guys have. It's that island life. Again, I've got a link to their video page in the show notes. I think they posted every fight as an individual fight after the fact, after the stream. They didn't post the whole stream, so you can check that out there. Now, in final fight review news, we've got to jump over to Manila in the Philippines for URCC. This event was crazy, and what I really love is that URCC had a fantastic stream set up with Sports 5, which is a ESPN affiliate in the Philippines. So it was really a high-quality stream, really like watching a pay-per-view, but it was a free Facebook stream. You can't go wrong with that. Now, I think everyone who knows the Philippines, knows that Philippines is known for great fighters, great stand-up fighters, but also, a lot of really good Asian MMA fighters come out of there. Team Lakay comes to mind, who's just got, a who's who of champions and fighters in the scene out of that gym. So no slouches coming out of the Philippines. Whenever you know that there's a Filipino card coming up, you expect good fights. And I mean, they really delivered. There was a lot of good action and some interesting things going on in that card. And before I get to that absolutely insane 3 versus 3 MMA fight, I want to talk about the main event because I had high hopes for this fight. And unfortunately, it kind of ended in a schmooze. Now, the main event was their 145-pound strap was on the line. Their champ, Mark Striegel, versus UFC Pancrase and Rings vet, Sunichi Shimizu. I have a hard time with some of these Japanese names, man. Now, I got to say, I was excited for this fight. I mean, Mark's got a really good record, a strong record. And he's been a really good champ with them. But at the same time, when you look at Shimizu's record, it's not fantastic. He's got a lot of losses. He's still got a positive record. I want to say he's 31-21. But, he's fought, tough guys. And he's fought in, great organizations. Like I say, he's UFC vet, Pancrase vet, Rings vet. So I had an expectation for this fight going into it that it was just going to be tough. Now, I picked Mark for this fight, but I really thought it was going to be a test for him. And the fight got off to a great start. Fast-paced exchanges. Mark was, pushing the pace, and he was really punishing the legs of Shimizu in that first round. I mean, you could kind of see his game plan was to try to punish the legs, slow him down, wear him out, grind him down, and maybe work for a finish in the third or fourth. Unfortunately, we didn't get there. In the second, Mark lands what is an absolutely brutal cup shot on Shimizu, and he just goes down. He's not getting up. They give him the 5 minutes recovery time, but he can't get back up. He's done, and you can see it on his face. I mean, he's just. It kind of likens back to me to the time when Wanderlei Silva versus Gilbert Yvel in Pride, and Vandy came out and just landed that shin right to the cup, and Yvel was on the ground, not getting up. Very much like that, except this was not intentional. This was very clearly an accident. It looked like Shimizu really just kind of stepped in when he shouldn't have, and because of positioning, and there was a kick kind of like midway, it landed, and it landed hard. There was no pulling back on it. So we end up with a main event that's a no contest. Mark retains the belt. But, I mean, I was excited for this fight, and the first round was delivering. So I hope they let these guys run it back. I'm hopeful. Let's see what happens. That being said, though, the only other fight I've really got to talk about on this card is this absolutely insane, this wild 3-man versus 3-man MMA fight. And it was billed as Team Philippines versus Team China. Before I get into this fight, one odd thing I want to mention, and this just stuck out to me when I was watching this, was that one championship judge and referee, Joey Lepiton, ref this event. He ref this fight, this 3-man versus 3-man fight, as well as a number of other fights on the card. And he did a great job. No real questionable stoppages or anything that I saw. I thought Joey did a good job. I think he does a good job in one as well. I only bring this up because I've been told by a number of other one championship officials that their contract requires them to work exclusively with one. Now, maybe that's not Joey's case. I mean, I haven't heard this from every single person at one. And it's not something I went out there asking. This is just something people were sharing with me. So I don't know what the percentages are, or if there's certain circumstances that require some of the officials to work exclusively with one. I don't know. That's clearly not Joey's case, because he worked this event that was very televised. It was live streamed on an ESPN affiliate. So we know people saw it. A lot of people saw it. Entirely possible. But another reason that I thought this was interesting is because there's been a lot of rumors that URCC and ONE don't have the best of relationships. Now, I don't know how deep that goes or where that comes from. It's just really something that was told to me by a few people, actually, in not just the ONE organization, but in the local scene in the Philippines. So I'm not sure where that relationship stands. I'm going to assume all things are better since we saw Joey work that card. And like I said, he did a great job, so my hat's off to Joey. But, this whole 3 versus 3-man thing, let's get into this, because, one, I don't know how a ref deals with it, and two, it's really a crazy situation. The first thing I noticed, like right off the bat, Team Philippines looked considerably larger than Team China. Like maybe some of them might have been like 2 or 3 weight classes bigger than the smallest Chinese fighter. Crazy, just to look at from a visual perspective. Again, link is in the show notes, so I recommend you watch that fight because it's something wild. The fight starts and they just kind of like all run across the cage and smash into each other like this big unorganized game of Red Rover, and before you know it, like I want to say like a minute in, one of the officials is calling a stop to the action. They never really make clear why. It sort of sounds like there was like an illegal blow or something happened. And then I don't know why it ended, but all of a sudden Team Philippines is the winner. And there was really no explanation. It was really strange. The crowd seemed to love it. But personally, I think these multiple people versus multiple people, this team MMA, it's really just a gimmick. And honestly, they're extremely dangerous because it's going to be difficult to control that situation. And plus, you end up with situations where it's like 2-on-1, or it can even be 3-on-1. It's so dangerous. And not just for the fighters. I mean, it hurts the promoters because it really takes legitimacy away from the sport, and it hurts the sport in general. If these promotions start to do this, it hurts the sport. And to me, as a fan of MMA, it's not something that appeals to me. And I hope it doesn't appeal to you guys, but maybe I'm wrong. Am I old-fashioned? Is this the way the sport's going? Is this what you guys want to see? I don't know. That's not. I don't want to sound like an old guy, but that's not the MMA that I love. I love the aspect of man versus man, one person versus one person, to see who the best is, not 3-on-1 at the end of a 3 versus 3 fight. I could see that in a street fight if I wanted to, and that's not what I want to watch. Anyway, enough of my ranting. Let me know what you guys think on that. Now, that's all I have for the fight recaps, but looking forward to next weekend, we've got one championship in Jakarta, and the main event is their flyweight Muay Thai championship with Sam A versus Jonathan Haggerty. Should be a good fight. I got to say, some of the one championship super series, like the K1 style kickboxing, their Muay Thai events, always fantastic fights. I mean, some great fighters in those divisions. So I'm excited just to see that. And the other thing of note here is making his one debut, we've got Yushin Okami versus Kiyomarin Abasov. Now, I only mention this fight. It's only really interesting to me because it's Yushin Okami's debut in one championship. And, 2 months ago, I would have said, of course, Yushin's going to come in and smash whoever he fights. It doesn't matter. And then we had Timothy Nastasiukin absolutely destroy Eddie Alvarez. And we had Yuya give Demetrius Johnson a hard time in his fight. So that's not so clear anymore. It's not so clear. We don't know that, UFC vets are going to come over and smash people. It's not as clear cut as I thought it was before their Japan event, before a new era. Now, I'm not saying I don't think that, one has the best in the world like they claim. I still firmly believe that the UFC has the best fighters in the world on their roster for the most part. But, after you saw what happened to Eddie and the hard time that Demetrius had, I'm thinking that the scales are a lot closer than I assumed they were. So it'll be interesting to see Yushin come into one, and especially when you look at his recent history as a fighter with his UFC pass. I mean, not the most stellar record. So we'll see where he's at. I mean, it could go any way. But, of course, as a fan, I'm just happy to see Yushin back in action, and I hope he does well. In other news, and this is interesting because it impacts the one Grand Prix, the lightweight Grand Prix, we found out that Ariel Sexton has had to pull out of the one Grand Prix against Doggy due to a broken arm. Why this becomes interesting is Amir Khan is going to take his place. Now, Ariel eliminated Amir in the previous round, so he's getting another shot, which I think is the way to do it. I think bring back the guy who lost, let him come in, and if he's healthy, let him have a run at it. They didn't have an alternate set up, so I think this is the way to go. It makes things interesting, because what happens if Amir wins? He already lost to Sexton. You've kind of got the storyline now for Ariel to come in and have another fight with Amir if Amir goes all the way through and wins this thing. Or even if Amir beats Doggy, then Ariel's still got this great storyline to be injected anywhere, even if Amir goes on to lose after that fight. They're kind of making the best case with this story-wise. It could go anywhere, and I like that about it. And, I think Amir can be an interesting fighter to watch. So this shakes up the Grand Prix a bit, makes it a little bit more interesting. Now, one other bit of news that dropped that I wrestle with if I should even talk about, but it's definitely legitimate to the world of Asian MMA, and that is one has announced that they've launched their own movie studio. They're going to be essentially making movies that are vehicles for their fighters to have a chance to star in a movie and make some extra money. To also promote the one brand and, their values, their core values, whatever those happen to be at the moment. Now, there hasn't really been a ton of news outside of that press release. We don't know the extent of the scope of the movies they're making, how many they're going to do, who they're working with, what their partners are going to be. They did say they're looking at online digital distribution. So, think Netflix, think YouTube, think, iFlix, which is sort of the Asian version of Netflix. This could go anywhere. Who knows? But it's definitely an interesting development. It's one branching off into another vertical. We saw them do esports. Now they're going into movies. I'll be honest, though, a lot of it feels a bit WWE-esque to me. My one hope is that none of these guys act as poorly as John Cena. I don't expect too many of them to be at the level of The Rock, but I think, getting above John Cena is not a very high bar. So acting-wise, Hollywood acting-wise, getting above that John Cena level, if anyone saw The Marine, you know what I'm talking about. So you don't have too far to go. But that being said, it could be exciting. It gives fighters potential revenue opportunities they maybe wouldn't otherwise have had. However, with one championship sort of controlling the entire pipeline now, and we'll talk more about this in the future because there's been some other news that broke recently that impacts this, that, now with this whole kind of pipeline that they control of where and when fighters can make money, I don't know what kind of flexibility the fighters have. One could kind of drive the prices down, and maybe it's not as good of a deal for these fighters. We're going to have to wait and see. That's all I have for you guys today. To stay up to date with all things Asian MMA, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook. All the links are in the show notes. If you want the podcast somewhere else, let me know where you want the podcast. asianmmapodcast@gmail.com. Send me a message. I'll submit the RSS link and I'll get the podcast posted there. I want you guys to have an easy time to find it, so let me know where you want to see it. Until next time, check it out.